Life often takes us on unexpected routes. We all experience moments of disappointment, unanswered prayers, shattered dreams, and confusion. The road to Emmaus represents those seasons when we struggle to understand what God is doing, yet it's often on those very roads that Jesus draws near. The Emmaus story teaches that Jesus walks with us even when we fail to recognize His presence. This is my special way of welcoming you to today's message. The title of the message is The Road to Emmaus. Of course, the story of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, as recorded in the book of Luke, had this special capturing of a moment that became so important in the life of many people. If you've ever been in a situation where you are confused, you don't know what next will happen, what next is going to happen, the road to Emmaus represents an encounter where all the wisdom and expectations of man has failed. And so we have two followers of Jesus Christ, not necessarily the disciples, because it was not recorded that they were the disciples. Meanwhile, the disciples, like Peter and those at the forefront, were of course running helter-skelter, trying to find meaning to the news that Mary Magdalene and the other Marys that visited early in the morning to discover that the tomb was empty. And so Peter, being one of the pillars of the disciples, was trying to find an explanation. But here we are caught up in the middle of two people who were walking down the road, and we are discussing this great event that has happened. Because for the Jews and the Roman Empire that was in power at the moment, they have destroyed an uprising. They have quenched a rebellion. They have rooted down this guy that have come to confuse the believers, that have come to bring a new religion, a new rulership. And so the conversation for those who were close, who understood that there was need for revolution, was that this man is that revolution that we are looking for. And so his death and his crucifixion represents a chattering of that hope. As we can see from their tone, I'd like us to read briefly from the Bible. That event is actually recorded in the book of Luke chapter 24. So I'd like us to take Luke chapter 24 from verse 13. From verse 13. It says, "And behold, that very day 2 of the disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had occurred. And while they were conversing and discussing together, Jesus himself caught up with them and was already accompanying them. But their eyes were held so that they did not recognize him. And he said to them, 'What is this discussion that you are exchanging, throwing back and forth between yourselves as you walk along?' And they stood still, looking sad and downcast. Then one of them, who is named Cleopas, answered him, 'Do you alone dwell as a stranger in Jerusalem and not know the things that have occurred here in these days?' And he said to them, 'What kind of things?' And they said to him, 'About Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in work and word before God and all the people. And how our chief priests and rulers gave him up to be sentenced to death and crucified him.'" I like us to pay attention to this. Verse 21 says, "But we were hoping that it was he who would redeem and set Israel free. Yes, and beside all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things occurred." 22 says, "And moreover, some women of our company astounded us and drove us out of our senses. They were at the tomb early in the morning, but did not find his body, and returned saying that he had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive." So some of those who were with us went to the tomb and they found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. I like to skip some verses and then take us again to the conversation that Jesus Christ now had with these two guys. Mind you, these two guys that we were discussing did not even know that it was Jesus Christ that appeared in their midst. And we're going to point to some of the significance of these events. But sometimes when we are caught up in that state of confusion, we may find it difficult to recognize the finger of God in what we are doing. We may find it difficult to recognize God when we are caught up in a state of confusion, when our hope is shattered, just like we see in this story. And so, Jesus Christ, after enlightening them, he said in chapter 25, in verse 25, Jesus said to them, "O foolish ones, sluggard in mind, dull of perception and slow of heart to believe, adhere to and trust in and rely on." By the way, I'm reading from the Amplified Version, so you have a lot of unpacking to do. Everything that the prophet have spoken, was it not necessarily and essentially fitting that Christ, the Messiah, should suffer all these things before entering into his glory, his majesty, and splendor? And so it continued. Jesus started reading out the truth about Jesus Christ himself, according to how it was recorded from Moses, the prophet, and then every other scriptures concerning himself. But yet, he did not understand. Of course, the conclusion of that passage was that at the point when he decided to abode with them and pass the night with them, because he wanted to go, he was testing them, and they asked him to stay back, that it was already late. Remember, they didn't even know that it was Jesus Christ who was speaking with them. And so, this story has several significance, like I said. And that is why I wanted to resonate with the title, The Road to Emmaus. That at a particular road, at a particular stage, at a particular time in our life, where we get to the points of confusion, the points of hopelessness. If you read through when these two guys who were conversing had to confess to even a stranger how hopeless the situation has become, that they were hoping that this guy, this revolutionary, was going to be the one that will cause Israel to be delivered. I like to bring it back to our contemporary society, where we are struggling, we are finding it difficult, especially in Nigeria, to understand what is going on at the level of leadership, national, state, and the local level. And so it is very important to recognize some arrowheads, some young people who have become revolutionaries. We have people like Showore, we have people like Very Dark Man. Just imagine that in a place where VDM, for example, being so popular, was arrested by the government, detained, or even crucified, how much the conversation it will generate. And so I like to liken this situation to what happened at the time when Jesus Christ was crucified. Charges were trumped up against him, both at the political and at the religious level, because the kind of religion that he was preaching was alien, was different. He was preaching a religion that changes the hearts and makes people to see humanity in all, not the selfish type that the Pharisees of that time or before him preached. And so people, especially the poor people who were treated badly, were beginning to recognize that a man was sent. And then reading through the histories, the prophets, the books of Moses, as they had in those days, they had recognized a trend that a Messiah was going to save them at a critical time in their national life. And so for them, they have already come to the conclusion that this Jesus was that Messiah. And now he is crucified. He's dead. He was even buried. And as if it was not enough, just as it usually happens when we are in a movie scene, he was crucified. He died. And he was buried. I like us to